Hello, welcome to the Musical Grant Program for 2015. My name is Nicole Lungerhausen and I'm the Grant Coordinator for this program. In today's webinar, we're going to speak specifically about the history and project description sections of the MGP application. So here's a list of what we'll be talking about specifically, and I highly recommend that you download the application so you can prior to looking over this webinar, so you can kind of follow along as we talk about each particular section. So we'll be looking at B, history background, C, performance history, D, project description, and E, promotion and timeline. And here's a link to where you can download the application forms before moving on in the presentation. All right, to start out with, I just wanted to talk about some tips on making a strong case for support. In addition to running this program on an annual basis, I am a grant writer and fundraiser for arts and culture groups, and other sectors of the nonprofit community. And I've been doing this for more than a decade now, and so I definitely have some thoughts and some experiences that I wanted to be able to share with the applicants so that you can make as strong a case for support for your project and for your work as possible. I think the number one thing is to really, for success in completing the application and feeling like you really put something that you can feel really good about forward, is to really plan ahead. And so what that means is to really give yourself plenty of time to look over the guidelines, look over the application, kind of figure out what your project is going to be about, who all the players and performers are going to be in it, or what all the components are going to be, giving yourself time to really think about like what all the details are. Because I think for me, in my own experience as a grant writer, the times where I've had the most success as a writer are for those applications where I've really been able to have, several weeks where I can kind of lay things out really carefully. I know we all have busy lives and things come up, and sometimes you have to do things at the last minute, and sometimes that can work out too, but I would say 9 times out of 10 when you're able to plan ahead, that's when it usually works out best, and it keeps your stress level down. And so on that note, I really recommend giving yourself time to do more than one draft. When I am drafting a narrative, especially if it's for a project that I am writing up for the very first time, I'm just sort of figuring out what all the parts are, the who, what, where, when, all of that. I really like to give myself plenty of time to do the first draft, because I know, honestly, even though I've been doing this for a really long time, I know that draft is just going to be really bad, and I'm going to have to go back and do a lot of editing and kind of thinking about it and making sure that I've got all the right components in it. So I think it's really great to be able to give yourself time to do that one draft, and then maybe just stick it in a drawer for a couple of days, even if that's all you have, just to kind of give your mind a little bit of, your unconscious mind a little bit of time to think it over before going back to it, because when you go back to it, you'll go back to it with fresh eyes. That's what usually happens to me. I go back to it with fresh eyes. I see things that need to be changed that I might not have seen before, or see components that I need to add in that I didn't have before. So I think giving yourself plenty of time to do that is really, really important. Another thing that can be really helpful is to enlist help. I know, I'm a writer, So for me, that's one of the mediums that comes easiest for me. But I know for a lot of people that I've worked with, myself or clients, it can be really challenging to write down what it is that you want to do, because it's just not a medium that's super natural to them. I think in that case, it can be really helpful if you, talk to a friend about what you want your project to do and ask them to take notes, or, use your phone to make a recording that you can listen to later and sort of pick out like the key pieces of what you were talking to your friend about, what the project is, why you feel really passionately about it, what you want to accomplish with it. Sometimes I've done that too with projects that I'm sometimes having a hard time getting my head around. I will sit there and talk about it with someone, or even just talk about it to myself. So I think enlisting help can be really helpful, and not just with the narrative part of it, of writing it out, but also with other parts of the application. It can be really nice to have another set of eyes to look over what you've written, or maybe what you've put together for your budget. I think another important thing is to make sure when you're looking through our application materials and our guidelines, and really for any funder that's out there, is to really answer the questions that are being asked. I know in running this program, the MGP program, for the past 6 years, I think one of the big things that people run into when they have an application that reviewers, our panel reviewers, find troublesome, or they don't understand, or they have a lot of questions about, it's because usually the applicant hasn't answered the questions directly. And so I think it's just really important to keep that in mind when you're sitting down to write your application. Let's see, I'm going to take an example here from the project description. And one of the questions is, what will you do? How will you execute the project? Okay, so what I would do when drafting it would just be like, okay, project, I will do X, Y, Z. I will execute the project by doing, ABC, so that you're really just being, even though it seems really simple, using really simple language, at least you know that you're being really direct in answering the questions that are being asked, and so that it makes it easy for the reader, for the reviewer, to find the information that they're looking for. I think another thing that's important in talking about the tone of your application, of your narrative, is to be passionate. I think readers, reviewers are looking for someone who feels strongly about their project, who is excited about it, who knows why they're excited about it, and they can articulate, what is driving them behind doing this project. And also, I think it's important to be confident about your project and to use, confident language and a confident tone that says that, I know what I'm doing. I'm a good artist. I have a good idea, and I have the know-how and the experience and the resources to make my project happen. I really recommend using simple, clear language. It kind of speaks to what I was talking about before about answering the questions. I think using really simple language, not a lot of majorly polysyllabic, complicated, complex words to describe what it is that you're doing. Imagine you're describing your project to someone who is not in your field, who doesn't work in your genre, who is maybe not even an artist at all. Use language that would help that person understand and get excited about what it is that you're going to do. And again, I think this is to refer back to one of my other points, this is a great time to enlist help. another person, an outside eye, can be that person to say, you know what, I don't really understand what you're saying here about what is motivating you to do this project. You maybe explain it in a simpler way. So definitely getting another person to check out your narrative is a great way to make sure that you're using that your argument is really clear. And there it is. There's my other point. Have someone else read your narrative. I guess it bears repeating. And then, again, another thing that bears repeating, just because I see it so often in the MGP and in my other work, is just to make sure that you're answering the questions. All right, so with those tips out of the way, let's talk specifically about the MGP application and the narrative requirements. So we're going to look first at the history and background section, which is section B in the application form. So here is a place where it's a single page where you get to tell us all about you and your background and how it relates to the project that you're asking us to support. So you get to tell us your level of experience as a composer or a performer or a presenter. Let us know about what your past history is. What are your recent projects? And a good tip with this and talking about your recent projects is to really highlight those projects that most directly relate to what it is that you're asking support for. So let's say that you are a performer and or a composer and you're creating a new work for an ensemble, or you're commissioning a new work. This would be the place where you'd want to talk about the other works that you've commissioned, other composers that you've worked with, where those pieces have been premiered, what kind of notice they received at the time. And it would be, if you happen to have, let's say, like an outreach program or an education program, well, that's great. But, since we don't support education or outreach, you kind of want to maybe downplay that aspect of your organization, maybe just devote less real estate to it and more real estate to projects that are more directly related to what we support and to what you're asking us to support specifically. If you're applying in the performer category, please include a sample of your repertoire, just to give the reviewer an idea of what kind of music it is that you're currently working on and working with. If you're in a position where you have a group, and this will typically be in the performer and the composer category, if the group is being formed specifically for this project, you're an individual bringing together various members specifically for to do a new work or do some other kind of project. I know this happens a lot in the improvising community. You want to do two things. You will complete the first page of the history background for yourself as a lead artist. And then you will notice in the application we include additional pages for history background. So in this case, you would want to include a second page with biographical information for each of the additional individual performers that are going to be involved with your projects. And you want to make sure that as part of that biographical information, you include a list of works in repertoire for them, if applicable. If your project involves collaborative partners, multiple partners, you want to make sure to include a one-page history or background statement for each partner that addresses the questions that we've been talking about. So about their background, their history, what their recent projects have been. And again, the same thing applies for your partners as it does for yourself. You want to make sure that your history that you're presenting is, and especially the recent projects, are really that you're highlighting those that are most relevant to what the project you're asking MGP to support. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the Section C, performance history. Now, technically, this is not a narrative, I know, but it is really a piece that complements your narrative, so especially your background and your history piece. So I think it's a good idea to talk about them together. In this section, if you refer to that section in the application, we ask you to list in reverse chronological order up to 12 past performances most relevant to the proposed project. Now, I know for people who are, have pretty extensive performance histories, obviously your performance history is going to be longer than 12 performances. And in that case, we do ask you to pick out those performances that you feel are, most pertinent to what it is that you're asking MGP to support. In the program description section of the performance history, you want to be sure to include the performers' names and what the instrumentation is. And in cases with projects or performances that involve commissions, you want to list their composers and the titles of the works. A few more notes about this section and I'll talk about this specific to different types of applicants. So composer applicants should list their performances of their works, not the concerts of the ensemble that is commissioning them or the ensemble that they're working with. And presenters should list what they have presented, not the past season of the ensemble, or in the case of festival presenters, the ensembles that they're presenting. And performers that are assembling a new group should list you should list the lead artist performances. But you can prioritize ones that include some of the musicians that are to be added to the project, if possible, if relevant, if that makes sense. If you as a lead artist have worked with these other musicians before, then definitely you want to include those performances that on which you collaborated with them. Okay, so the next section we'll talk about is D, performance history. Or I'm sorry, that's not right. It'll be D, project description, because we just talked about performance history. So this is a 2-page section where you get to tell the reviewer, the reader, all about what it is that you're going to do for the under the MGP award. Now, some of these points are that we ask you to answer. Depending on your project, some may be more applicable than others, and some may just require more description than others. But please do make sure to answer all the questions to the extent possible that you can. So the first section is your project activities. Okay, what are you going to do exactly? Is it going to be a commission? Is it going to be a performance? Are you going to be doing a recording, something else, some kind of a hybrid thing? And how will you execute the project exactly? What are the steps that you will go through to make sure that the project happens? From the development phase to the rehearsal phase to the performance, or the whatever the end product is of your particular project. How is it all going to work together? Then we want to know, one of the big things that we want to know after that is what's motivating you for this project? Why are you doing it? Why this? Why now? What excites you about it? In this section, you want to address what impact it'll have on yourself as the applicant, and if it's applicable, if it makes sense as part of your project, the community. If you have an ensemble that's being newly formed, if you're a lead artist and you're bringing together a specific group of performers specifically for this project, why have these performers been chosen? We really want to know, what the rationale is for working with these particular folks. And the next section is the budget. And this section will tie in to the project budget, the project budget of the application, which we also will talk about in more depth in another webinar, our budgeting webinar, if you have questions specifically about how to lay out a budget. But here is a chance for you to kind of lay out in narrative form. Let us know how much is your overall budget. Is it $3,000, $4,000, $10,000? How will you use the MGP funds? What will our, $3,000, or in the cases of commissioning, $4,000, what eligible costs will that be used towards? And if your project costs more than the MGP grant, what other sources of funding are you going to need? Are you seeking out money from other foundations? Are you doing like a Kickstarter campaign and you anticipate some money coming in from that? Perhaps you are in a position where you're going to be able to apply some money from some gigs that you're doing during the project period towards this project. So just give us an idea of, where else the money will come from, so that when the reader is looking this over, they know that you have in your mind a plan for getting the money together, the resources together, to be able to make sure that this project happens from start to finish. Okay, the next section in the narrative is the promotion and publicity and timeline. And this is a single page of 2 different sections. And in the promotion and publicity, this gives you a chance to tell us how you're going to share what you do with the public. If it's a performance, how will you get the public to come and see it? How will you market it, raise awareness about it? If your project involves public performance, where is it going to take place? Do you have a specific venue in mind? If you don't have a venue, then how do you plan to go about securing one? And then how will you go about promoting the performances themselves? In the instance of doing something like a recording, we want to know, what's your plan for making sure that once the recording is completed, it gets out into the world. Is it going to be on CD Baby? Is it going to be on iTunes? What other, ways are you going to have a performance like a CD release party? That will be a part of your recording project. And then for the timeline, we want to know what the major dates are, or the milestones for your project. So here you get to lay out, like, this is when we anticipate starting it, starting development. This is when, the composer will get us the score, and when we'll start rehearsing. This is when the performances will actually take place, or, this is when our marketing will take place from X date to X date. So just here it gives you a chance to lay out with as much detail as you possibly know at the time what exactly, what exactly are the marking places along the road of your project. Okay, so if you have further questions after looking over this webinar about the narrative parts of the application, about the performance history, or things like that, there are quite a number of resources that you can call on. A really good one is our FAQ that we have on our website. It is very extensive, has a lot of in-detail questions about the narrative parts of the application, about project budgeting, about eligibility questions, and it lays out very detailed answers. So that's a good resource. If you find that is not, that you still have questions that need to be answered, there's a couple other ways you can get in touch with us. If you're a first-time applicant, just to let you know, you have to contact a San Francisco Friends of Chamber Music staff member prior to submitting an application. This is absolutely mandatory. And you can visit the link below and click on it to schedule a phone appointment. And they can talk you through anything having to do with eligibility. You can ask them questions about how, about laying out your project and making sure that it's within our guidelines. But this just gives you a chance to just run through your project with someone who's knowledgeable about the program before committing a bunch of time towards working on the application. If you're in the position of being a returning applicant and you have questions about the application, you can either book an appointment with an SFFCM staff member, and we actually highly recommend even returning applicants to book appointments to talk about eligibility, overall project, etc. Or you can email me directly at mgp@sffcm.org. All right, I want to thank you for joining me for this webinar, and I wish you best of luck with your applications.